You're watching the Allegany College of Maryland's state and local government classes Maryland 6th Congressional District Republican Debate, held March 24th at the Cumberland campus of Allegany College of Maryland, in conjunction with Frostburg State University's J. Glenn Beall Jr. Institute for Public Affairs and the Allegany College of Maryland Center for Continuing Education, in cooperation with the Garrett County Democrat Club and the Garrett and Allegany County Central Committees.
Well, thank you and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to this evening's Congressional Forum for Maryland's 6th District for the United States Congress, being broadcast live this evening at 1270 a.m. WCBC and online at WCBCradio.com. This evening's forum also being recorded to be played back on Atlantic Broadband Channel 97 and Comcast Channel 3, and those dates and times will be announced very shortly. There are 13 active candidates vying for the 6th District Congressional seat. That number will be reduced by the primary election to be held very shortly on Tuesday, April 3rd. Now, this forum is designed to permit voters of our community to learn more about each of the candidates so they can make an educated choice on Election Day. The second part of our forum this evening is featuring the Republican candidates, of which there are 8. A little information on the format for tonight's forum. The candidates are seated, thank you. The candidates are seated in alphabetical order according to their last names. Each round of questions will alternate which candidates answer first. So the candidate that answered first in the previous round will then answer last in the next round. The questions the candidates will answer this evening have been submitted by the state and local governments class of Allegany College of Maryland, the Frostburg State University's Beall Institute, Allegany Democratic State Central Committee, the Greater Cumberland Committee, the Labor Council, students from Allegany College in collaboration with professors from FSU and Allegany College of Maryland. Each candidate will be asked the same question. The members of the panel who will ask the question this evening are students, and Maria Edmondson is a criminal justice major at ACM, lives in Cumberland. Susan Smith, an office technologies major at ACM, who lives in Frostburg. Forrest O'Baker is a political science major at ACM from Cumberland, Maryland, and Daniel Weir is a history and political science major at FSU residing in Hagerstown. Before we start, let's begin with each candidate and having a moment to introduce him or herself, and let's start with the A's.
Well, now, because I'm first, I need to ask, how much time do I have?
1 minute.
1 minute. Good. Well, I'll go fast then. Good evening, everyone. I'm Kathy Afzali, candidate for Congress, a conservative Republican. I am a businesswoman, a Maryland state delegate representing Frederick County, and I am also a mom. And I'm running for Congress because I'm a mom and because I'm scared for my kids and for their future. And I was just so thrilled to see these young people here. I actually have a daughter who will be a senior next year who's a junior this year, so it's nice to see you. I have a to-do list, and my to-do list is never raise the debt ceiling, make Congress follow the same laws as you have to follow, repeal Obamacare, stop over-regulating our companies so that they cannot compete globally, simplify the tax code, and energy independence. I know a lot of you are probably concerned about Marcellus Shale. I'm very concerned about that too. Energy independence, Kathy Afzali.
Roscoe Bartlett, it's been my great honor to serve you for the last nearly 20 years. Considering the accusations in recent mail pieces, I thought it might be nice to note who has endorsed me recently. The NRA, Maryland Right to Life, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Right to Work. I have the same ACU score as Michelle Bachmann. This is the first time we've had a debate in a college, I think, and I thought I might note that I've been honored to give scholarships. I think about $282,000 worth of scholarships in the 9 colleges across our district. It's been my honor to do that. My opponents are going to accuse me of voting against a lot of good things and for a lot of bad things. And if they will come to my office, I will help them compile an even bigger list. Because every bill we vote on in Washington is made up of good things and bad things. We vote them in on balance. So I'm frequently voting against things I would like to vote for because they're keeping bad company, and the opposite is also true.
Good evening. My name is David Brinkley, and I'm honored to be here with you today. I was born 52 years ago in the heart of the, at that time, the 6th District, and with the recent redistricting, it certainly has been changed. That was in Frederick, is where my farm is and where my business is. I do financial planning. I began my public service many years ago as a volunteer firefighter and an EMT. I then was elected to the Republican Central Committee, then the House of Delegates did 2 terms there, and now I'm in my 3rd term. I've been honored to represent the citizens of Frederick and Carroll County in the state Senate. My leadership was rewarded, I guess, by the members of the Republican caucus when I was elected the minority whip and the minority leader. So I've been very blessed to have all that. And I'm also very pleased to have the endorsement of Senator George Edwards, Senator Chris Shank, Delegate Wendell Beitzel, and Delegate Leroy Myers. Why? Because I've worked with those individuals over many, many years. They've seen the product. What's happening down in Washington is abysmal, and I'm asking for your vote on April 3rd. Thank you very much.
Hello and good evening, everybody. My name is Robert Koblenz. I'd first like to thank Allegany College of Maryland, Frostburg State University, WCBC Radio, and all of its sponsors for hosting this wonderful event. I know it's a lot of time and energy that you invested tonight. We're certainly very appreciative of that. This election is very important. If you think Martin O'Malley's 2nd term is bad, wait until if Barack Obama gets his 2nd term. I am an average citizen, concerned for my country. That's what got me into this race. In 2008, I was a registered independent. I saw Barack Obama, and I saw it was crystal clear where my principles and values on the political spectrum were. So I continued to get involved. I was the vice president of the Washington County Republican Club. I was voted Republican of the Year for all the awareness and club growth that we had. Conservative principle values is what we do. I'm also a commissioner on the Housing Authority of Washington County, Board of Zoning Appeals, and also serve as a board member for the Tri-County Council. Thank you.
Ladies, gentlemen, Republicans of all ages, I'm Robin Ficker, and I've got the green hills of Western Maryland on my sign because I'm never going to forget Western Maryland. And I didn't when Western Maryland was recently attacked with this proposal to double your gasoline tax. My campaign involving signs, emails, radio advertisements, and telephone calls resulted in thousands of your calls going down to Annapolis and thousands of your emails, and we've got gas tax garagiola on the run. It wasn't enough to be passive. You had to do something about this gas tax, and I did, and it's on my sign. I'm an attorney that's been going to court in Cumberland and Oakland for 30 years. I'm very familiar with Western Maryland. I'm not just up here for the campaign.
My name is Peter James. I live in Germantown. I'm a robot farmer, husband, dad, and I'm the guy who wants to let you find out about money. And our biggest issue in this campaign is the economy, and all the candidates across the board are going to say they're going to create jobs. Well, first of all, that's not an authority granted under my constitution. I'm a constitutional constructionist, pre-FDR days, and what I've done is I don't have any pretenses. 93% all the congressional seats get won by the person who spends the most money, and Roscoe's got us pretty well beat as far as that's concerned. But I am taking this opportunity to issue just money, and I want you all to find out what just money is and why our present money system is crashing the system, and I'm running because it's going to crash within the next year. It's going to be worse than it was in 2008, 2009. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Joe Christoforski. It's a long name. It's the one you're not going to forget. I've always been proud to be an American. I've always been proud of our country. I've always been proud of the principles upon which the country was founded. However, I'm not proud of my government any longer. Congress consistently abdicates its responsibilities under the Constitution. We have a president who's looking to circumvent the Constitution in every way, shape, or form. We've got a Department of Justice who picks and chooses the laws that they want to enforce. We've got an immigration policy that we should be enforcing, and we're not, and we haven't for years. Economy, fiscal responsibility, that's my top issue. Jobs are a top issue. Right? We're spending money faster than it comes in. And people will say that the problem is we have to raise taxes. Right? It's not a tax, it's not a revenue issue, it's a spending issue. The more money we give the federal government, the more money the federal government is going to spend. And it's been proven over and over again. We have to cut spending, not increase spending. We have to reduce the size of the federal government. We have to open up. Joe Christoforski, running for Congress. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Brandon Rippian, and I am proud to be a Republican. There are two things that separate me from my colleagues up here. Number one, I do live in the district. I can actually vote for myself. I do think living in the district, being part of the community, is a big deal. The second thing is I am the only candidate up here with personal experience operating a $100 million company. I have the management skills, the decision-making skills, the leadership skills, which are desperately needed in Congress. I always say, don't let the boyish looks fool you. I am a very serious businessman. I understand the real-world economy. I understand how difficult it is out there for folks to earn a living, and I know that the future of our country, of this district, of this county, depends on private sector investment, private sector development, and private sector enterprise. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. A couple of ground rules here. Every candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the question. Please restrict your answers to the allotted time. You will be permitted to finish the sentence that you are speaking at the end of the allotted time. As you already heard, probably the most important job in the entire evening is being held by Jessica over here with the bell. In fairness to all the candidates, please do not begin a new sentence after your time has expired. This did not happen in the previous forum, but a candidate will be provided an opportunity for a 1-minute rebuttal if his or her name is specifically mentioned in another candidate's response to a question. The rebuttal will be requested by waving the colored card provided to each candidate. In our final segment, you have the opportunity to make a 2-minute closing statement. We'll be taking about 3 breaks every hour, about 20 minutes. Give us an opportunity to catch our breath and briefly relax. So let's get started. First question will be for candidate Afzali and be asked by panel member Maria Edmonston.
There has been considerable discussion recently regarding Iran's possible development of nuclear weapons. If you are elected to Congress, what steps would you take, if any, to address this situation?
Well, it's a very precarious situation. Obviously, the regime in Iran, the Ayatollahs and the Ahmadinejad, I can't even say his name, have threatened, and they've threatened Israel, and Israel is our ally. So the question is, how do we respond? Now, their bunkers where their nuclear weapons or their potential nuclear weapons are so deep underground, a preemptive strike, which I would agree with, would be very difficult to do because it would be very challenging to try to hit those weapons. So the question is, what do we do in the meantime? Iran is a very interesting character in the Middle East because they usually don't do direct strikes. They're like crabs, they move sideways. And usually they pay other people to do their dirty work. So I'm not certain that they're going to directly hit Israel from their own land, but they could potentially hit from the ocean. They could potentially hit from dirty bombs in other places. So we have to be very aware that preemptive strikes are an option, and it needs to, this is what we call the Bush Doctrine, preemptive strikes. If we have the intelligence that tells us that they are about to hit or they're about to hit someone who is an ally of ours, it's our duty and our obligation to preemptively strike them. And I am also, to my good fortune, the wife of actually a refugee from Iran. My husband is an immigrant from Iran. He actually escaped Iran before the fall of the Shah. So I have a particular interest in this part of the world, and I have a lot of knowledge in terms of what's happening on the ground there. It is not the people. The people are being held prisoner by a regime that is going to destroy the Middle East if we don't do something. And the sanctions are not working, and so we need to look to other measures of how to strike them.
Thank you, Delegate Afzali. Representative Bartlett.
If current trends continue of oil production and oil use in Iran, within a decade, Iran will be an oil importing country. Unfortunately for them, like most of the oil producing countries, they are subsidizing the use of oil in their country. I think gasoline is something like 68 cents a gallon. A few years ago, they tried to increase that price because they know that within a decade they're going to be an oil importing country, and they had riots in the streets, and they couldn't do that. They pulled back. So they have a very legitimate need for nuclear power to offset some of their uses of fossil fuels, oil in particular. But if that's their primary goal, they're doing a very bad job of articulating that, because most of the world believes that they are in the process of developing a nuclear weapon. Neither does our intelligence community nor the Israeli intelligence community believe that that is imminent. But why would they move their enrichment facilities underground? And they're doing that. They are now deeply underground. I read an interesting report the other day, something that I didn't know, and that is that Iran produces the best concrete in the world, the strongest concrete in the world. And if they are reinforcing these underground facilities with that, they're going to be difficult to get at. We have sanctions. I think they're working. I think we're doing it right. I have some concern about trying to take out their capability. I'm not sure, but what they're so far underground that all we would do is delay them a bit. I have no idea what this would do to the Arab Street. Nobody has any idea what this do to the prospects of a widening war in that area. We need to get behind the sanctions. They are working. They're putting a lot of pressure on them. They're responding, letting us know it's putting a lot of pressure on them. Let's hope that sanctions work. We don't have to go to attack.
Thank you, Representative Bartlett. Senator Brinkley.
Thank you. You know, when we address any of the American foreign relations and the issues that we're very concerned about, remember, as my history taught me, and I know that we all are aware of this, one of the, if not the primary function of this government is to secure its borders. And we're not going into a conversation yet on illegal immigration, but securing the borders ensures that we, within its borders, are safe. And Iran's a very important, Achilles heel in our security in that regard. The Straits of Hormuz and the amount of energy that gets shipped through that narrow region, and ensuring that we're safe with that. Israel is our key ally in the Middle East. Anyone who doubts that, remember, Israel's the only democracy over there. And their democracy, they've tried to formulate it after our form of government. Does it mean it gets ugly? Absolutely. But we have to do everything we can to ensure Israel's security. Why? They are our chief proxy over there. They are the part of the reason why we may not have to send American troops and put their lives and limbs at risk in defending some of our interests. And again, as was mentioned earlier, we have to keep the distinction in mind versus the people and the government. The government is who we have a serious beef with. The government is who is a declared enemy of this country and Israel and everything that we stand for. And so there has to be a distinction there. Am I prepared to back any type of surgical strikes? I'm prepared to back it if we have the data or the intelligence or enough questionable stuff that perhaps can merit it by some sort of deductions. Did we do that with Iraq? Yes. Are we still debating the consequences of that? Absolutely. But I would much rather err on the side of caution, ensuring the protection of our borders and things that can go on. Never forget 9/11. Never forget 9/11. We didn't fathom that something like that could happen. And that's the principal responsibility of this government to ensure that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Brinkley. Mr. Koblenz.
Thank you. The safety and security of the American people is first and foremost my number one initiative, and I think it should be our government's number one initiative. Iran is a serious threat. There's no trust. There's no verification. I do support preemptive strikes, the first half of the Bush Doctrine. I do not support the second half of the Bush Doctrine, which is nation building, which is where we are with Afghanistan today. We've been there for over a decade. We're targeted to get out of there after we train their security forces in 2014. I'd like to see our troops come home. I don't want to get involved in another war unless we have clear evidence that Iran has nuclear threats. However, if you think $4 and $5 $4 or $5 a gallon gas is expensive today. If Iran has a nuclear weapon and all the speculation arises in the Middle East based on Iran's actions today, wait until they have a nuclear weapon. Then we're looking at far higher gas prices. That's the end of my answer. Thank you.
Okay, Mariah, if you would have a chance here to, or halfway through this part of the panel, maybe restate the question very quickly, if you would.
Okay. There has been considerable discussion recently regarding Iran's possible development of nuclear weapons. If you are elected to Congress, what steps would you take, if any, to address this situation?
Mr. Ficker.
Sanctions is a good idea. War is not, especially a war without a declaration of war that's approved by the U.S. Congress. I'm the only person on this panel that has an honorable discharge from the U.S. Army. I attended the United States Military Academy, and my father-in-law was Lieutenant General in the U.S. Army in charge of logistics for the Army. And I can tell you from personal experience, seeing my classmates, seeing their friends, that war is hell. We don't want to get drawn into a land war or any kind of war in Iran. Iran is 5 times the size of Iraq. It has 3 times as many people as Iraq. And I looked at President Obama's deficit reduction. Much of his deficit reduction is ending the war in Afghanistan and bringing the guys home. So much for deficit reduction if we get involved in that trap in Iran, let alone what's going to happen to the price of oil. I was reading in Bloomberg Newsweek this morning that the price of oil will be at least $8 to $10 a gallon. We can't afford that. We can't afford to get into a war in Iran. And as someone who has been experienced with the military to some extent, I'm not going to let that happen unless Congress declares war and approves the declaration of war. We have to be very careful with Iran, however, because they're abutting our good friend and neighbor, our good friend Israel. And Israel is an ally, it's a democracy, and we have to do whatever we can to protect Israel.
Thank you, Mr. Ficker. Mr. James.
Boy, I got to tell you, I fear that we're becoming what we fear the most. I had an uncle who was the most decorated soldier in the Second World War, the most decorated battalion. John Eisenhower wrote a book called Battle of the Bulge, and the Bitter Woods, rather, and he was in the Battle of the Bulge. But he said, Peter, don't let it happen again. Don't let it happen here. We are made in God's image, all men, not just Americans. What right do we have to say that we have the right to defend ourselves but not some other country and pick and choose? If you really look into what's going on with Iran, they're talking about going off the dollar. And to me, a lot of the bankers would like to see that not happen. But we've got competing with China and Russia to maybe move to something other than a dollar. If you look at Afghanistan, we were buddies with Mujahideen, which is now Al-Qaeda and the Taliban rather, and we wanted to have the pipeline, but they were holding out for bigger prices. So there may be a lot of different reasons of why we're going to war, but the Congress has the ability to provide for our defense, not for our offense. Great republics turned into empires and dictatorships when they decided that they were going to be colonial powers or military powers and take over other countries, and this just whole thought of a preemptive strike. Who wants a third world war? And I'm half Greek, and I haven't worried about Iran invading anybody since Xerxes came over in 300 BC. Now, sure, there is probably some terrorism, but I see pictures on the news where there's terrorism going on in Iran, and I don't know if it's us or the Israelis, but we have to be honest with ourselves. Thank you.
Mr. James. Mr. Christoforski.
You heard everybody up here say basically almost the same thing over and over again. I'm going to repeat a little bit of it. We have to remain strong, and we can't let our guard down. Iran is the prevalent threat in the Middle East. I don't think anybody would disagree with that, and there's a lot of people in the world who don't disagree with it. The economic sanctions are working, so we should continue the economic sanctions. The diplomatic sanctions are working. We should continue with the diplomatic sanctions. But we can't stand idly by and let Iran develop a nuclear weapon capability. But we can't take any action unless we have credible evidence. All right, credible and verifiable intelligence. We made that mistake in Iraq. All right, I don't believe we had credible and verifiable intelligence on what was going on in Iraq. We pulled our troops out of Afghanistan. We moved the theater into Iraq. I will support action against Iran if Congress is asked to declare it, and there is that credible evidence that they are on the verge of attacking an ally of ours, and that ally is Israel. The Middle East is stable right now because of the United States, and it's stable because of Israel. Israel is helping us keep that stable. That's it. Thank you very much. Can I reserve the balance of my time for another question?
No, we're actually not accruing time, but thank you for the effort. Mr. Rippian.
Thank you. Look, we're currently funding both sides of this war on terror right now. We spend all of this money on national defense, and at the same time, because West Texas Intermediate is at $105 a barrel, Brent crude is at $125, we give our enemies all the sources of revenue that they need to fund terrorism, to fund their nuclear weapons programs. Petroleum is a commodity, and the principles of economics tell us that if you want to reduce the price of a commodity, you have to increase the supply. That is what we should be doing, ramping up domestic petroleum production, domestic natural gas production, bringing the price down, and cutting off the sources of funding that our enemies are using to hurt us. Specifically about Iran. Look, this speaks to a larger issue of U.S. foreign policy. Where did Iran get its start in nuclear weapons? Well, it came from Dwight Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace program. I think oftentimes we have a very short-sighted, myopic view of foreign policy in this country, and I think that we need to look farther down the road and always keep in mind of the consequences that can happen when we do these things. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rippian. Listening to the Congressional Forum for Maryland's 6th District for the U.S. Congress. We're going to take a short break right now and come back with more questions for the candidates.
In today's economy, everyone is watching the bottom line. Our low tuition rates combined with scholarships and numerous financial aid options help make a college education affordable. We are Allegany College of Maryland.
Let's start with the next question. Will be for Representative Bartlett. It will come from Forrest O. Baker.
Do you support increasing the federal minimum wage?
Of course I do not support increasing federal minimum wage. Minimum wage is a kind of a statement that somehow we can mandate prosperity. And on the floor I told him, gee, if we can mandate prosperity, I'd like you to mandate longevity. I'm next to the oldest person in Congress, and if you have the power to mandate prosperity, you have the power to mandate longevity. We don't have the power, obviously, to do either one of those things. All that minimum wage does is cut off the bottom rung of the economic ladder. I was on a small business committee, and we were having a debate on minimum wage, and I said, gee, you know, if without any consequences you can raise minimum wage, why don't we just make it $20 an hour? And one of the Democrat witnesses says, yeah, $20 an hour. And then other people said, gee, that would kill jobs. It kills jobs. Of course it kills jobs. At whatever level you put the minimum wage, it kills jobs. I'll tell you what I want to do. I want people working. See, I would like to have a welfare system that says when you get a job, I'm going to make up the difference between what you make on the job and what it takes to live. I don't want people hungry. I don't want people sleeping in the streets. But minimum wage is not good for the people it's supposed to help. It just cuts off the bottom rung of the economic ladder. You know, people need to work. I think work is therapeutic. And once people are working, I am more than willing to help make up the difference and help them. They shouldn't be sleeping in the street. I don't want them on welfare. And once they get working, they're going to learn skills that will enable them to make more money in the next job. Of course, I don't support minimum wage at any level.
Thank you, Representative Bartlett. Senator Brinkley.
Thank you very much. And I've had the privilege of representing, as I indicated in my opening statement, the people of Frederick and Carroll County in the state Senate. And to that end, I've had the opportunity to vote on this type of issue and also something that was called the living wage down in Annapolis. And I voted no. And I voted no. I've had many opportunities to vote no. Why? Because that artificially sets a higher threshold whereby fewer people can then have a job. And in many instances, some people just need the entrance opportunity. Get me in the door. Let me show that I have a tremendous work ethic, and then I can, bring them on up through the scales. I have a business myself, and we have staff in 2 offices, Gaithersburg and my office. And there's times that someone comes in and they're really exceptional. And there's times that some aren't. And that's just a reality. You know what? We don't have a minimum wage for the guy who puts people to work or the lady who decides to set up a shop to explore a craft that she's enjoyed and then wants to sell it at a retail level or something like that. They don't have that, nor should they. And I don't feel that we should have, an increase in the federal minimum wage with what we're doing. There's an organization I would invite you to go to their website. It's called Maryland Business for Responsive Government, mbrg.org. That organization ranks legislators and their voting records. And in my case, they have evaluated my voting record since 1995 when I was first sworn in. So there's many, many records. And that is a better indicator, I think, of a person's knowledge for what's available for job-creating opportunities. And that's exactly what they're tracking. I'm very honored to have the 3rd highest ranking in the state Senate. And at this point in time, they ranked the best Republican and the best Democrat. And last year, I had a 100% voting record with them. So I would encourage you to look that up. Our mission here is to put people to work and let them keep themselves at work so they can take care of their families. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Brinkley. Mr. Copeland.
Good evening. I do not support minimum wage. I prefer free market principles to dictate the salary of individuals. I think minimum wage is counterproductive to what we're trying to do, and that is job creation. It's harder for college graduates to find employment opportunities. As the previous candidates alluded to, it contracts the job market. It makes it harder to find jobs because it costs the employer and the business more money to hire individuals. I am for repealing any regulation and mandates that that would be counterproductive to creating jobs. I want to spur our economy. I want to grow our economy. And I think adding confidence and insight into the job market and the free market would invite businesses to feel more comfortable and confident. I want more people to participate in the American dream. If we had minimum wage, more folks would be on welfare and jobless benefits. Right now, our jobless benefits are 99 weeks. You heard candidate Newt Gingrich for president say that's an associate's degree. That's far too long. We need to, more jobs would also broaden the tax base and invite people to allow them to participate in the government to have additional tax revenue. If we didn't have more jobs, government wouldn't have as much revenue and we would be spending more on welfare. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Copeland. Mr. Ficker.
I'm not for increasing the minimum wage, but I am for more jobs. Let's look at a company you may know, Apple, the largest U.S. corporation. I'm a stockholder. The stock's up like 45% just this year. It has 500,000 jobs in China and Japan and 10,000 in the United States. If we had the reverse, some of those jobs would be here in Western Maryland. And I'm going to focus on that company and find out why we don't have more Apple jobs in the 6th District of Maryland. I'm tired of hearing that the 6th District is the tail on the dog. The 6th District is tops. We've got the highest elevation. We're the Tower of Pisa. We're the smile on the Mona Lisa. And the 6th District, is going to rise in prominence on Capitol Hill when I get there. As a former legislator, I can tell you they're going to know that the 6th District is around, and they're going to know the 6th District is a good place to bring jobs. I remember when Pittsburgh Plate Glass was here. It's gone. I remember when Bosch and Loam was here. It's gone. We don't need more prison jobs and more gambling jobs. We need more high-tech jobs. And Apple, Tim Cook, you're going to hear from the 6th District of Maryland and Congressman Ficker in January. I'm going to want to know what we can do to jawbone with you and what we can do to give you incentives to bring some of those 500,000 jobs and $100 billion that you're holding overseas out here to Western Maryland, Cumberland, Oakland, Hagerstown, and Frederick. Thank you.
Mr. Ficker, thank you. Mr. James.
Yes, this is the defining question to distinguish myself from the rest of the candidates here. In 1937, there was a review of the Social Security Act of 35, and it was evident that the court was going to find it unconstitutional, but FDR said he was going to pack the court, and scared as they were, they basically reversed their position and found the general welfare clause in the Constitution to mean that Congress can do anything and everything as so choose. Now that to me just means you might as well get rid of the rest of the Article 1, Section 8 and the rest of the thing, because if Congress could do any one thing for the general welfare, they may decide that Obama should be our next dictator and delegate all the powers to him. So I'm what's called an original strict constructionist. I've listed in this little brochure the enumerated powers that I believe are the only duties Congress have. You know, I don't want to argue the benefits and the good and the bad of whether we should have a minimum wage. We can't have it because I would promise to uphold the Constitution, and I would be lying if I either had a minimum wage or would say, well, we're not going to have a minimum wage, but we're going to tax you guys to bring this guy's standard of living up to the minimum wage. And sure, we can have Apple come over here. I'm sure if you guys want to work for 10 cents an hour and 16 hours a day, and when you get carpal tunnel, they'll just kick you to the curb, I'm sure Apple will move over here in a heartbeat. But I want to build businesses from the businesses that are here, and the way to do that is not to create all these stimuluses, but go back to the Constitution where Congress has the power to coin money and set its value. If we took that away from the banks, we would have prosperity, and history shows that it does create prosperity by having just money. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James. Mr. O'Baker, could you repeat the question, please?
Do you support increasing the federal minimum wage?
Mr. Christoforsky.
No, I don't. I don't for two reasons. One, my family ran a small business up in New York where I grew up for years. And every time the minimum wage went up, all right, we either had to hold off hiring somebody or let somebody go because we couldn't afford the increase in the minimum wage. But if we let the free market guide us and let the free market create jobs, we'll bring more benefits to the economy, and salaries will increase as a result of the marketplace. Right? We can't force businesses who can't afford to pay the salaries, all right, who are barely scratching by and making a living, all right, to pay a minimum wage and lock them into the minimum wage. It's a free market system. Everybody has to be able to be hired and paid based on their capabilities. Right? In the business that we had a couple of employees that were making at that time what was the minimum wage, and we had a couple making more than the minimum wage, and we had people all across the board. And the reason why they were paid based on their skill set and what they were capable and able to do and the type of job that they were able to do. The federal minimum wage hurts jobs. It does not create jobs. It does not open up opportunities for people. It actually closes doors and takes opportunities away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Christoforsky. Mr. Rippian.
Thank you. Being here on a college campus and being one of the last persons to answer the question, I don't want to plagiarize anybody else's answer, and I know we have some college professors here tonight. So I don't support raising the minimum wage. Look, government involvement in the economy is the problem. It is not the solution. Government involvement in the economy raises transaction costs. It distorts our labor markets. I do support free market principles, and I support getting the government out of the economy and turning it over to the private sector, to the businessman, to the businesswoman, to the entrepreneur. Look, from Frederick to Montgomery County, we have a high-tech corridor, and I want to see that come west. The future of job creation is in the STEM programs: science, technology, engineering, mathematics. That's where the future lies. We have a global economy, and we have to be able to compete on a global level. The future lies with the high-tech agriculture jobs, the pharmaceutical jobs, the biotech jobs. That's where the future lies, not with the minimum wage jobs. So we always have to look to the future. We have to look to the horizon, and we have to grow the economy by supporting the private sector. Thank you.
Mr. Rippian, thank you. Delegate Afzali.
Well, I get to go last, and it's hard not to plagiarize, so I will move on to something else that has to do with that. First of all, I too have a 100% rating by the MBRG that the senator was speaking of. So I am a firm believer in free markets, as probably everyone else at this table. But I think the ultimate problem has to do with regulation, and that's what I was saying in my opening statement, is that we are so overregulated that we are no longer a free market economy. And it comes from the president on down. When you look at the regulations with regards to agriculture, how many here are farmers or in agriculture? The things that are coming down, the nutrient management that comes down, that all came down from the federal level, from executive order. We have that, which is a significant problem to Maryland agriculture. We also have the problems with the regulation in terms of energy. Our congressman has repeatedly voted against drilling for sources of gas and oil in our country, in Arnoir and in Maryland. This is a serious issue, energy independence. The regulation that keeps us from being energy independent is what hurts our national security, and is very important that we overturn these regulations and allow us to tap into those natural sources of oil and gas that we have right here in Maryland and here in the United States. And also the Keystone Pipeline, that was another regulation. We have regulation upon regulation that keeps our companies, that keeps our businesses from competing globally, and that's what causes people to be unemployed. It's not that we don't pay them enough at minimum wage. If we make our businesses competitive, they'll start hiring because they'll need people to innovate and do all those things.
Delegate Afzali. Representative Bartlett, I think you waved the card. 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much. For a long while on Capitol Hill, for a decade now, I've waged an educational campaign about energy and what we ought to be doing. I have been successful in that campaign. What I wanted to do was to have very vigorous programs in alternative energy, because the United States reached its maximum oil production in 1970. We're up a bit now with Bakken oil. There's not even 4 billion barrels there. That would last the world about 45 days, the oil that we have in the Bakken oil out there. I just voted with a lot of other Republicans for H.R. 3408 to move forward with the Keystone, to open up offshore drilling. I voted with Don Young. He signed on to my bill. We co-sponsored a bill for responsible drilling in Anwar that would be accompanied by investing the proceeds from that in alternative energy. We're way late in investing in alternative energy. I waged this campaign for 10 years now. We've been successful. We have a very vigorous program on alternative energy, particularly in our military.
Representative Bartlett, thank you. We'll take another short break and be back with more Congressional Forum for Maryland's 6th District for the U.S. Congress.
An Allegany College of Maryland education helps open doors in the job market. 100% of employers of ACM alumni said that they are likely or highly likely to hire additional ACM grads. We are Allegany College of Maryland.
Our next question will be for Senator Brinkley. It will come from Susan Smith.
How's that? The creation of a north-south highway corridor has been a long-time dream of many in our community. Would you support such a project, even if such money was considered a federal earmark?
The north-south, is this working okay? Okay. Thanks for the question. The north-south highway corridor it's vitally important. Let's look at the history of Cumberland, this whole segment in western Maryland, is that commerce has thrived when better and improved transportation modes have been implemented. You can see it with the river traffic, then when the canal was placed, then the railroads, the highway, and the national highway and all that. Having the highway corridor go from the Pennsylvania Turnpike all the way down to Corridor H, which has been planned in West Virginia, I think would be a vital north-south way of commerce. You know, my family's from West Virginia. My parents were from Clarksburg, West Virginia. And again, when I was a kid and we'd go out there driving out Route 50, Dramamine, I don't know, had been invented yet. And so then when 48 came through, it was a godsend. And of course, now we know it is Interstate 68. And to have something that goes north-south would be critically vital to the commerce here, but transportation in particular. And I'm going to call out somebody who's not here, and that was someone who appeared earlier, Senator Graziola, who this new district that was split was crafted for him. And it split this whole heart of the 6th District and then incorporated into western Montgomery County. You know, that's a big challenge that we have in trying to bring back the two parts of the 6th District and have fair representation for them. But then we also have to ensure that transportation and roads in particular are funded. And they've been advocating for more and more rapid rail system down in Washington and Baltimore, as much as he's been pushing for gas taxes. That's not coming back to the roadway and the road systems. And, you know, I've been a strong advocate in fighting all that until we can put a lockbox in place around the Transportation Trust Fund. We've got to have this corridor built, and I think it would be essential to having new jobs created in this vicinity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Brinkley. Mr. Koblenz.
Thank you. I live in Washington County, as I previously mentioned. I know Interstate 81 is such an excellent tool to utilize for commerce. There's, you know, from all the way down to like Tennessee, Southwest Virginia, all the way north up to New York till you get to 80, or actually it's in Pennsylvania until you get to 83, and then you can head up to New York and New Jersey through that way. However, the Department of Transportation, and Federal Highway Administration currently spends $50 billion annually right now. And the budget currently consists of mostly of grants to the states. I believe that the states should work together and work with private industry to devise a project and raise the funds and allocate those funds towards a corridor or project like this. We have roads that we can't afford infrastructure on today. Bridges, your $20 million improvements. Yes, this would be a project to spur the economy, but we have to look at what the initial investment would be, where those monies would come from, what the life cycle costs of managing those roads would be. But I think if the states work together, let me back up a second. As I mentioned, the federal government allocates funds to the states. Right now in Maryland, the transportation fund has been raided, and we don't have any money to improve our roads. If we remove a portion of government in that process and introduce private industry, that would hold government accountable. And that would ensure that our taxpayer dollars are wisely spent. So yes, I am for allocating funds to the states to improve their highways and working with private industry to making sure that our taxpayer dollars are spent adequately. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koblenz. Mr. Ficker.
Well, of course I'm for the north-south highway, and I'm also opposed to funding the Purple Line in Prince George's County and the Red Line in Baltimore. I was listening to the Democrats on the radio before this meeting. They come up here and say, sure, they're for the north-south highway. But then when they're down there in Montgomery County, they want to spend your gas tax money on the Red Line in Baltimore and the Purple Line in Prince George's County. They're talking out of both sides of their mouths. You can't do that. I'm consistent. And David makes some good points. He should be running in the 8th District where he lives. Kathy should be running in the 8th District where she lives. She's already running for delegate to the convention in the 8th District. And Joe should be running against Elijah Cummings in Baltimore because he lives in Baltimore County. I live in the 6th District of Maryland. I'm proud to be with you. I've been coming to court out here for 30 years. I'm not just making stuff up at election time like those Democrats are.
Thank you, Mr. Ficker. You have allowed 2 people to respond. Delegate Afzali, you wave the pink flag first. Delegate.
Well, isn't this delightful? I get to have a rebuttal. That's
1 minute.
fun. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that the 6th District, although it's been decided by the state legislature, it has not been decided by the voters yet. There is currently a petition drive going on. So you should know that we don't know who's going to end up in the 6th District after all is said and done. On top of that, I live in Middletown, Maryland. I've been in the 6th District for the last 18 years since I've moved here. And I have to tell you that it's myself and Mr. Koblenz who live the closest to you. The gentleman who was talking about me, he actually lives the furthest from you down in Montgomery County. So if we're going to talk geographics, let's talk about who lives closest to you and who's out visiting you and who will be your congresswoman, who will be right here next to you and out visiting you consistently as I do with my current constituents in Frederick County.
The delegates allowed 2 more people to flash their cards. Senator?
Thank you. As I said in my opening statement, I was born and raised in the 6th District. And I fought the redistricting, which carved it apart. And it carved it apart specifically to attempt to keep me out of this race. Right now, the boundary is 4 miles from my farm. And I feel that that's okay, especially from the context that the Constitution says it's okay. But I want you to answer at some point in time, Robin, why Thursday night you stood in Montgomery County and said Montgomery County needs a congressman from Montgomery County. And you ignored, and I called you out on it in front of the Montgomery County audience. I called you out because you wanted to represent Montgomery County, and you had nothing to say about Garrett, Allegany, Washington, and Frederick in that statement. You were rah-rah Montgomery County, send a Montgomery County congressman back down to Capitol Hill. And this area needs representation, not Montgomery County. They have their congressman at this point in time.
Mr. Ficker. Then we'll get to Mr. Koblenz. Mr. Ficker first to respond, if it's okay, to respond initially there. You have 1 minute.
Well,
okay, pardon me?
David.
Okay, so in other words, Mr. Ficker is not allowed to speak. Is that the?
I was attacked on a different issue.
1 moment. Time out. I'm going to call a quick timeout and talk to the NFL Superior Committee here. The commissioner will make a decision.
Wait, let's see what they say.
Mr. Ficker, you need to hand the mic to Mr. Koblenz. You can use your next 2 minutes, so the next time around, to respond if you would like. Okay, I'm going to need a scorecard on this one. Mr. Christoforsky, you've got 1 minute.
How many people in this room live in the 6th District? Raise your hands, please. We all live in the 6th District. The people at this table that don't live in the 6th District today, I'm not going to mention their names. All right, but they don't live in the 6th District today. All right, for voting purposes, we're not in the 6th District any longer. But for legal purposes, we are still in the 6th District. The 6th District officially doesn't change legally until January 2013. I came to the 6th District, I came to this area, Washington County in this area, in 1986 when I worked for a company that brought jobs to Western Maryland. I've been up here in Western Maryland probably more than any candidate at this table, including the incumbent. All right? I've put over 60,000 miles on my car, all right, coming out here and meeting the people in Western Maryland, here, Garrett County, and in Washington County, and in Frederick County. My heart is here. My soul is here. I am moving back into the 6th District. I have a real estate agent that's been looking for a house for us. We vetted her. She is now looking. My wife and I have actually looked at houses in the 6th District, and if anybody wants that real estate agent's name, I will give you that phone number to verify it. Thank you.
Mr. Koblenz.
The fundamental question is, can you vote for yourself? If the answer is no, then you don't live in the district. The only person that can really vote for themselves is Delegate Afzali, because she's also on the ballot in the 8th district for delegates of Republican National Conventions as a Romney delegate. So she's the only one that can vote for herself, but it's not for Congress. So maybe Delegate Afzali can wave her pink card and explain to us why she's also on the ballot for 8th district. But seriously, if you don't live in the district, I believe it's a liability in the general election. The Democrats are going to use that as a tool to solicit independent voters, and I think that is, like I said, a very strong liability that, and a candidate that's going to have to carry around with them during the general election.
Thank you. We're going to institute instant replay here and examine the outer boundaries, so we'll be doing that. Susan, could you repeat the question? This will be, I think where we were is Mr. James. We'll get back on track here, Mr. James, but the question will be asked by Susan. Go ahead.
The creation of a north-south highway corridor has been a long-time dream of many in our community. Would you support such project, even if such money were considered a federal earmark?
Mr. James.
Well, I'm all for ending world hunger. I'd like to get your old Porsches. I'd like to end world hunger, get you all Porsches and everything good in the world. But once again, I'm the guy who wants to go back to the original intent of the Constitution. There's nothing in there. There's something about post office and post roads. Jefferson and Madison said not even building them, but I'll go far enough to build a post road. So if we need a one-lane road to get the post truck back and forth, that's something else. But what I'd rather do is rather repeal the federal gas tax and let his buddy Gargiola increase the gas tax so you can spend it here. But I also like you to go to the internet and Google the Guernsey experiment. And it's about an island of Guernsey off the coast of England. They had no money to build their marketplace. And they went to the governor and they said, well, what are we going to do? They said, well, do we have the materials here? They said, yes. Do we have the labor to do it? They said, yes. I'm sure you have a few quarries around here, don't you? And he basically said, well, what do you, I don't understand, what's the problem? They said, well, we don't have the money. He said, that's fine. We'll just make some of our own. Now, Guernsey has one of the highest standards of living in the world. They're a money center. There's no reason that you guys can't issue the money yourselves. You might have to do it through a private corporation because state entities still aren't allowed to do it, but I would be willing to say if Congress is not going to do the duty, you can. But that's really all it comes down to is the money, right? So there's throughout history, when you have a sound money system, you have prosperity. The King Henry didn't have any money after one of those 100-year wars, and he went and he created tally sticks. They lasted for 700 years and provided for the Renaissance in England. Thank you.
Mr. James, thank you. Mr. Christoforski.
North-South corridor is needed. I've met with your county. I've talked to the county commissioners about it here. I've talked to people in Garrett County about it. The federal government, the state government is the one that's going to take care of the roads. They're going to be the ones that do it. As your congressman, what I could do is help cultivate relationships. I could work with companies to help bring advanced industry to Allegany County and to Western Maryland. Companies like biotech companies, life science companies. Companies will move to the area when there is access to roads, when there is transportation in and out of the area. If you look at Route 83 in the eastern end of the state, when that went north-south, it brought companies all along the corridor. You look at Route 81 in Washington County, it brought businesses all along the corridor, with transportation up and down from Pennsylvania, from New York State, all the way down to Tennessee. And that's what we need here. If we're going to bring jobs here, we need to take a look at the business building blocks, the industry building blocks that we need to bring to Allegany County. And what's going to bring it here is a good, sound infrastructure. And the state is the one that's responsible for that infrastructure. I'll work with the state government, I'll work with the local governments to look at bringing those types of industries to it. Allegany County has community assets that businesses want. We have a low crime rate here. We have a skilled labor force. We have the rail transport system. That rail transport system can be utilized again to transport goods in and out of Allegany County. We have a great arts and entertainment business industry starting up here, and we have a world-class education system here. We've got this Allegany College here. We have Frostburg University, and a world-class health system right across the street. There are all the types of community assets that businesses want. And we've got that workforce. So what is Allegany County lacking? Allegany County is lacking the infrastructure. We're lacking that north-south corridor. So I will work towards a north-south corridor, and I'll do whatever I can to help your local government, local officials get that north-south corridor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rippian.
Joe, you had all the great points. You took my whole answer here.
Everybody else is taking mine.
Look, roads are good for business. Roads are good for the economy. Transportation and infrastructure, like Joe said, I mean, it's a building block. It's a fundamental part of what we need. Earmark has come to be a very dirty word that gets thrown around a lot. Look, we pay the federal gas tax out here. We pay the state gas tax out here. As a businessman, I believe that revenues should be matched to expenses. If we pay a gas tax, it should be used for infrastructure and transportation. What I don't support is taking these taxes, and I don't support any higher taxes, but the taxes we currently pay, taking these taxes and using them for the general fund, using them for entitlements, using them for other things other than what they are specifically set up to do. As a businessman, like I said, I believe matching our revenues with our expenses, if we did that, if we had correct business principles, correct business procedures, correct accounting, we could fix these infrastructure projects, make investments in our community, because ultimately infrastructure is needed if we're going to grow the economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rippian. Delegate Afzali.
Thank you. It is challenging going last because a lot of the points have been made, but I'll say something that hasn't been tapped upon, and that is public-private partnerships. And these have been done in different states, like our neighbors to the south in Virginia, and have been very successful with bridges and different roads. So infrastructure spending by your federal government is very important. Of course, we need to get our fiscal house in order. That's a given, and our nation is broke right now, so we have to be cognizant of that. But I will tell you, and of course I'm going to have to invoke someone's name, but the congressman has been there for 20 years, and have you asked for improvements to this road before? This is not an earmark. This is your congresswoman's duty to bring this infrastructure money back to the district so that you can bring the jobs here to the district. You need this infrastructure spending, and it's very important that your congresswoman be an advocate for you and your community. I live in Western Maryland, so I understand the needs out here, and I understand how important it is that you have access. And also trucking. When you see a truck on the road, that means that somebody's got a job and somebody is transporting goods. That's a good thing. That's a very good thing. So we want to make certain that you have an advocate in Washington to bring those dollars back. And I also will say and make a note that I've been in the state legislature long enough to see how that transportation trust fund has been rated by our governor. And it's a travesty. And this is the money you're paying that's going to Montgomery County and to Baltimore City and is not being spent here. So that's why this is so critical for your congresswoman to be a barracuda when it comes to serving you and bringing that infrastructure money back to the district.
Delegate Afzali. Representative Bartlett. Yes.
I'm surprised that Kathy mentioned this again, that I haven't brought back federal highway dollars. Kathy, let me explain once again to you how this works in Washington. Every 5 years, we have a reauthorization of the transportation bill. Up until recently, that's always been accompanied by a lot of earmarks. They give each one of the 435 of us money that we can spend any way we wish. When I first came to Congress, I was just barely there a bit, and they gave me $15 million that I could spend anywhere I wish. I put it where the senators later put their money, the I-70-270 interchanges near Freddie, because that was the biggest problem in Maryland. The senators thought so too. All of the other federal dollars go to the state on a formula basis. I have nothing to say with how that money is spent, and Kathy would have nothing to say with how that money is spent. If she has a problem with where the money is spent, it's the problem down there in Annapolis, not my problem. That goes to Annapolis on a formula basis. They make all the decisions.
Okay, now, Mr. Bartlett, I believe you have a chance to answer the question concerning my memory serves me correct. I think it's a north-south corridor issue. You have 2 minutes on that one, sir.
And would we make it an earmark? I think that was part of the question that nobody else has addressed.
Yes, I think the second part, would you support such a project even if such money were considered a federal earmark?
There are two major north-south roads, 81 and 79. And if you go between these roads, that's true in Maryland. It's even more true in West Virginia, where they don't have a 68. If you go between these two roads, the further you get from these roads, the higher the unemployment gets, and the lower the average salary gets. So clearly, transportation matters, and matters a lot. In West Virginia, they got through Corridor H. That's the belt on the H. If you look at this 81 and 79, Corridor H is the belt on the H. This north-south corridor here would join us with that belt on the H. Yes, it would be very important. Clearly, it would bring more jobs to this area. Just a word about earmarks. You know, I have had more than $500 million in earmarks brought back to the district, most of it for defense-related things. I publish my earmarks on my website. I'm not ashamed of my earmarks. You know, we have every bit as much right to spend money as those faceless bureaucrats in Washington that put the president's budget together. The president's budget is a long series of earmarks. Money for this, money for the other thing, money for that. It's put together by faceless bureaucrats that you will never see, that have zero accountability to you. What we need to do with earmarks is to make them accountable and visible so that you have to answer for the earmarks that you have. Yes, I would make it an earmark if I could. It would probably be my earmark in the next transportation bill. If we could have earmarks, regrettably we can't. And by the way, if we don't have earmarks, your military is always going to be 1 year to 2 years behind the Chinese and the Russians, because the president's budget is 1 to 2 years old. And all the new technologies for the past 30 or 40 years have been brought into the military through we call them plus-ups there, and they are fundamentally different from earmarks other places. Yeah, I would do it with an earmark if that was the only way to get it done.
Thank you, Representative Bartlett. You're listening to the Congressional Forum for Maryland's 6th District for the U.S. Congress, and we're going to take a short break right now. I'll be back.
Allegany College of Maryland's network of 3 regional campuses puts an education close by. Plus, classes are offered at various times to fit your busy schedule. We are Allegany College of Maryland.
You're watching the Allegany College of Maryland's state and local government classes Maryland 6th Congressional District Republican Debate, held March 24th at the Cumberland campus of Allegany College of Maryland, in conjunction with Frostburg State University's J. Glenn Beall Jr. Institute for Public Affairs and the Allegany College of Maryland Center for Continuing Education, in cooperation with the Garrett County Democrat Club and the Garrett and Allegany County Central Committees.
And welcome back. Our first question will be for Mr. Koblenz, and the question will be asked by Daniel Weir. Daniel?
One of the biggest questions we face as a nation is to balance our national budget and reduce the national debt. Which steps would you take to reduce the federal budget and debt? Please be specific.
Great question, Daniel. Thank you. First, I would cut, cap, and balance the budget. I think we need to instill confidence in businesses. And I think we do that by getting rid of the Environmental Protection Agency. The EPA, their regulation and their mandates are working outside the legislative process, and we need to, that's why we're here. We work with people. We have to promote an environment for business to thrive. Government should be an adversary, or a partner, not an adversary. We need to work with one another. I work tirelessly, if I can say that, to reduce discretionary spending. And I also believe in a flat or a fair tax. A flat tax, say 12 to 15%. You hear a lot about the 1%ers, and everyone needs to pay their fair share. But what about the 47% Americans that pay no taxes at all? Is zero their fair share? Everybody uses essential services, police, fire, national defense. I believe everybody should be paying taxes. You have an investment in your community and in society as a whole. So I think that would broaden the tax base and increase our revenues. Social Security, that we certainly need entitlement reform. By the year 2037, it's projected that Social Security funds are going to run dry, okay? That by the time I retire, I'm not going to have any money to draw down from Social Security. I don't expect it. But I think that folks should have the opportunity to opt in and at least contribute a portion, if not whatever percentage, into a private account. Because we need to make sure that that money that they contribute, FICA is a contribution. It's not a tax. That's your money. When you retire, you deserve that money, and that should go directly to you. And I would also audit the Fed. Too much quantitative easing, printing of money. We need to understand what they're, why, and have further insight and transparency on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koblenz. Mr. Ficker?
Well, to start off, I'd bring the guys home from Afghanistan. That would be a big savings. But you folks need to know what's coming at you. This district has been reconfigured. It was drawn. 1 million people, 1 million Marylanders were moved into new congressional districts so that gas tax Garagiola could get this seat. And he's my state senator. I know him. I've beaten him before. And I'll tell you how in just a moment. He's a tax increase specialist. He was the deciding vote on the biggest tax increase in history in the special session in the Maryland legislature. He was the lead proponent of the gas tax increase, and he led the opposition against my successful property tax limitation question. I had a question on the ballot, and my ballot questions in Montgomery County have received over 2 million votes. My question required a unanimous vote of the county council for the council to exceed the inflation rate on property tax increases. He opposed it. It passed in our district 56-44. And here's what the National Taxpayers Union vice president said at the national conference when he pointed to me during their meeting. Your victory is a national record to pass a taxpayer protection measure at the local level against such difficult odds. I know Montgomery County. It's all Democratic. Bob Ehrlich got 32% of the vote there. It's going to be very tough for anyone up here but me, and I'm the best-known Republican in Montgomery County, to win that half of the district. I've been going to court for 30 years in the other half of the district. I've beaten Garagiola before on that property tax, and I'm going to whip him again, and I'm be your congressman, and I'm not going to raise your taxes like he will.
Thank you, Mr. Ficker. Mr. James.
Well, this is a softball for me. Remember, guys, money, go watch this video on my website or Google it, Money is Debt Too. To answer this question, this is the most misunderstood information in the world of how money works. We think in our regular lives, oh, if we just pay off our debts, everything's going to be good. That's not how our entire money system works. I spent 35 years studying money systems, including our own, and I've had radio shows with world-renowned economics professors and experts like Milton Friedman on there. We have about a money base of $2.3, $2.4 trillion, which 1.5 is excess reserves that bankers are paying themselves interest on, by the way. But if we take just our public debt, we've got a $45 trillion private debt, but just take the public debt. If we paid off $2.3 trillion of that $15+ trillion debt, we would still have $12 trillion of debt, but there would exist no money in circulation. The money system works just like a Ponzi scheme. In order for money to come into circulation, it has to be borrowed into circulation. When you pay off the principal on a loan, it gets extinguished from circulation. But they never create extra money to pay the interest. So every year what we see is just to keep the money supply level, they have to keep raising the debt. And that gets so big, it has to collapse. And what happened to late 2008, 2009? They stopped loaning, and the debts collapsed. The money supply collapsed. We have to understand it. We have to get our arms around it and understand that this is the core problem we face. So please watch the Money is Debt video. Your lives, I guarantee, will be changed forever. Thank you.
Mr. James. Mr. Christoforski.
Immediately cut current federal budget by 85%. Immediately. 85%. Back to the 85% of 2010-2011 levels. Embrace free market principles. We all talk about regulation. We have too much regulation. We have to cut the regulation. Reduce the tax rate, corporate tax rate. The United States is ranked 13 in ease of starting a business because of our tax structure. We should be ranked #1. We're the free enterprise country. We're the free market country. We have to spur economic growth. Move the government to a zero-based budget where every year, every department starts at zero. No automatic increases. None of this, oh, I've got this money sitting here in my budget. It's coming to the end of the year. I'm going to spend it, or I'm not going to get my 8% automatic increase is going to be less next year. Stop the spending of any remaining stimulus funding. Freeze defense spending for the next 5 years. All right? We need to have a strong defense, but there's a lot of waste in the defense budget. So we could freeze the defense budget and still have the same level of military readiness. Freeze federal pay for at least five years. No increase in contract workers at the federal level. All right? As we lose federal workers through attrition. Reduce funding to the United Nations. Why are we funding the United Nations when they're trying to eliminate our sovereignty, where they're trying to tell us what to do? Right? There's a suit that was being filed in World Court about voter ID, and they're taking that to the United Nations. So the United Nations is now going to try to say that the United States cannot have voter ID at the polls and identify people at the polls. Going to a zero-based budgeting and starting every year at zero will go a long way. Stimulate the economy, not through funds, not through giving people money, but stimulate the economy through reducing regulation. The EPA, the new Dodd-Frank bill that passed will create agencies that you will never see. I can finish that sentence, right? The size of the type of bureaucracy that will come out of those agencies. They must be eliminated.
Thank you. Thank you. Daniel Weir, would you re-ask the question, please?
Sure. One of the biggest questions we face as a nation is to balance our national budget and to reduce our national debt. What steps would you take to reduce this federal budget and debt? Please be specific.
Thank you.
Mr. Rippian.
Thank you. Well, I think our national debt is not only an economic issue, it's also a national security issue. It worries me that China is owning more and more and more of our debt. That means they have more power and more influence over us. I think that is very dangerous. We need to be the masters of our own destiny here in America. Look, we need to grow the economy. I don't support raising taxes. I think we can balance this budget by growing the economy and cutting spending. We have to grow the economy. As a successful businessman, I always go back to principles of economics, and there's two. People respond to incentives, and rational people make decisions at the margins. Those are two time-tested fundamentals of economics. If you believe in those things, there's no reason why anyone would want to do business here in America when you look at those two principles of economics. We have the second highest corporate tax rate of any industrialized nation in the world. We have incredible bureaucratic red tape, regulation. We have all these unappointed czars running around imposing their will on people. We have to put incentives in place so that businesses want to do business in America and not in China or in Europe. We have to promote savings and investment. We have to put incentives in place for individuals to save for their own retirement, take care of their own long-term health care needs, especially our youngest generation. That's where we really have to focus. We have to focus on entitlements. Entitlements make up 40% of the budget. So without real entitlement reform, we're not going to get there. As a specific, I believe that our youngest working Americans should have the option of whether or not to participate in these social welfare programs. We have an all-volunteer military in this country, but yet we have forced participation and in conscription into these social welfare programs. I don't support that. So by growing the economy, by reforming our entitlements, Medicare, we have to get away from practicing defensive medicine. We have to put free market principles in place. All of these things will lower the transaction costs and allow us to balance the budget without raising taxes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rippian. Doug Afzali.
Yes, I just want to make it clear that I think people throw that term around balance the budget as if that's going to save us. in the state of Maryland, we have to balance the budget as part of our Constitution. So what does it mean? It means that when you don't have enough money, you go out and you borrow from bonds, which this year we borrowed about $1.5 billion to cover to balance the budget. So people think, oh, we need to get a balanced budget amendment. That doesn't mean that your government's going to balance the budget. What we need to do is cut the spending. Think of it this way: you might have access to get a home equity line of credit. If you could get a home equity line of credit, you're borrowing against the collateral, which is your home. Now think of our government getting like a home equity line of credit from China, but instead of borrowing against just our home, or you borrowing against your home, you're borrowing against your neighbors and your whole neighborhood, the whole downtown of Cumberland. That's how far in debt we are. We owe over 100% of our gross domestic product. We are broke. So, how do we turn it around? First of all, we replace the president. It starts at the top. We need a new president. And until we get a new president, we're not going to have the confidence. Part of the problem is the money, the capital is tied up because companies don't want to spend their money because they don't know what regulations are coming. The government is so over-regulating them, and they don't know what to expect that they're holding on to their cash. American companies are sitting on hundreds of millions and billions of dollars of cash that they don't want to spend because they don't have the confidence. So we need to start at the top and get a new president. So after we get a new president, we need to lower those corporate tax rates, bring it down to about 12 or 13% so that companies aren't trying continuously to avoid the taxes, and let our innovators and our job creators get to work.
Thank you, Delegate. Representative Bartlett.
Every 6 hours, there's another $1 billion increase in the deficit and the debt. Our deficits this year will be about $1.3 or $1.4 trillion. All the money that we vote to spend in what we call discretionary programs is about $1.2 trillion. What that means is if we had no government at all, if we had no military, no Homeland Security, no NIH, no FBI, no Department of Agriculture, which means no food stamps, we would still have a several $100 billion deficit. So it's obvious that the discretionary programs are not driving the deficit and the debt. Well, I just want to parenthetically say here how proud I am of the constituents of the 6th District. In our last poll just a few days ago, we asked them the issue that was most important to them. And they said that it was deficit and debt. That had been number 2 in 2 previous polls to that. It's even more important to the constituents of the 6th District than jobs and the economy, which has been number 1. And indeed, it is more important. What that means is that our, what we call entitlement spending and the entitlement programs and mandatory spending is about 2/3 of all the money that we spend. This is in 4 programs. It's an interest on the debt, which is now fortunately low because interest rates are low. That will not stay that way. It is Social Security. It is Medicare. It's Medicaid. The Republican budget does not balance for 25 years the Ryan budget. We face a very serious problem. I'm really pleased that our constituents recognize how important this is.
Thank you, Representative Bartlett. Senator Brinkley.
Thank you. I'm going to take a few seconds to address the question because I think you've heard, and as the last person to answer. But number one, I think bringing cash from offshore, and by that I mean from companies that have money that's locked offshore, that they would be penalized, that nearly 1/3 of it would be paid out in taxation. Particularly as we want jobs back here. It was mentioned earlier about Apple. Let's get Apple to invest here. So that's just one example of one of the things. The other thing, from my experience in being in the Senate Budget and Tax Committee, and I know some people disagree with this, but I do believe that the federal government should say, Maryland, you get X dollars. You decide, and this is through the block grants, you decide how best to spread that around among your population and your population's needs. Now, I want to get to something that was mentioned earlier with the 3P program. The 3P program was listed as a possible solution on the transportation issues. And yes, that's about jobs and it's about getting us out of the economy. The 3P bill, and it stands for Public-Private Partnership, is being voted today in the House of Delegates. Over 125 bills are being voted today in the House of Delegates. And I'm directing this. You can grab the pink card if you want now, because I'm one of your constituents. And why aren't you there voting today? And when you said you're going to be a barracuda going down on Capitol Hill, well, you got to be in the water to bite. You got to be down there to vote. You had to be down in Annapolis on Thursday to vote when they were taking up the budget, and you missed all of those. And my key to this is how in the world, and you're going to have 60 seconds, look at the camera and tell people why you're here campaigning and not representing me and the other 45,000 people or the other 85,000 people in District 4 when all these critical issues are being there. We can understand an excused absence for being able to take care of these businesses. Please, tell the camera.
Senator, thank you. I assume the delegate would like to respond.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to address this, because the senator has brought this up before, and I think it is important, and I want to thank him for at least attacking me after I had introduced myself. I have served in the House of Delegates. I have a perfect attendance record. I work very hard for my constituents. I did have a decision to make tonight. They were voting. I did not miss the budget vote. I did vote no on the budget. I had a decision to make whether to come and introduce myself to you for the first time and probably the only time that I will see you before your very important decision on April 3rd. And the reason I decided to come is because the senator, as well as our congressman, have been in leadership positions for him 15, 16, 17 years, and the congressman for 20 years, and have not done anything to help Republicans get elected in this state. If I am your congresswoman, it's not just about the federal government, it's about turning this state around. And you are going to need help from your congresswoman to help do that, and that's why I'm here.
Representative Bartlett, I assume you would like to take 60 seconds.
When I came to this seat nearly 20 years ago, it was a solid Democrat district, except for Garrett County, most of which, by the way, flows into the Mississippi River. Now, the 5 major counties I represent do not have a single elected Democrat county commissioner. Kathy, you know, I've been here, and my example has told a lot of people that they can register register Republican. It's okay to register Republican. The president of my bank, Nevin Baker, was a conservative Democrat. He said his politics never changed. Now he's a very conservative Republican. You know, because of my witness, because of what I did down on the Hill, this is now an overwhelmingly Republican district, and it was overwhelmingly Democrat when I came here.
Thank you. I think this is a good time to take a break. Congressional Forum for Maryland's 6th District for the U.S. Congress will continue.
Allegany College of Maryland is all about quality. In a recent survey, almost all ACM graduates found their classroom instruction to be of high quality, and they felt they were well prepared to start their career. We're Allegany College of Maryland.
Here we have time for one more question, and then what we'll be doing is taking a short break, and we'll have some closing statements, so you can get prepared for that. Mariah, would you ask the final question of our candidates, and it will be going to Mr. Ficker. Mariah?
Okay. We applaud you for running for public office. There is a divisive, corrupting corrosion in American politics today. What would you do to work civilly together in Congress, Democrats and Republicans, to solve the nation's problems?
Well, that's what I've been doing for the last 30 years. I've been in court every day, advocating a point of view, oftentimes for people that have little support, few friends, against tough, hardened prosecutors. Most of these cases result in negotiated settlements. And if I can negotiate a settlement with those prosecutors, believe me, I can with the other party. When I was in the legislature, I was one of only 15 members of the House of Delegates out of 141 who was a Republican. And I worked well then. I want to invite all of you here to a bike ride that we're going to be having from Oakland to the Beltway in May. My daughter is coming. She was second in the World Ironman Triathlon Championships. She's won the Savage Man Triathlon, still holds the run record there. We're not going on the canal. We're going up the big hills. My son Flynn, who is graduating from the University of West Virginia with a degree in petroleum engineering in May, and who also has an MBA, and who wrestled for 5 years in the Pac-10, he's going to be coming on that ride. I'd like to invite you all to come. Physical fitness, see the district, see the voters throughout the 6th District. I'm looking forward to giving you energetic, effective representation. This district has been sleeping for too long. We're going to wake them up. We're going to move ahead. We're going to get new jobs in here. We're not going to do it by increasing your taxes. And you're going to be proud that I'm your congressman, and I'm going to be proud of you as I already have been for 30 years. Thank you.
Mr. Ficker. Mr. James.
One of my great fears is to reach the end of my life and find out that I'm not the man I claim to be. I think that might be one of our all great fears. But one of my favorite movies was Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. The other one was another James Stewart great, It's a Wonderful Life. And I took from those two pictures two things. One is, help the little guy and fight the banker. And the other one is going to Washington and follow your conscience. And I believe if you elect me over an incumbent, that I will be able to put the fear of God in all the other congressmen. I was told by Justin Amash, he's a freshman congressman. He said the greatest fear of the members of Congress, or their greatest goal, is to get reelected. I will go to each one of them and say, you can uphold the Constitution, you can fight the bankers that have ruined us all and plan to ruin us again, and you can get elected. And as a matter of fact, and particularly I'll go to the leaders, the chairman of the different committees, and I'll say, I'm coming to your district to teach your people about money and about the Constitution, and if you don't get in line, I'm going to help throw you out. Now, there's a whole movement, and if you look at the polls of this guy Ron Paul over at the exit polls in Virginia, he whipped Romney's butt with the independent vote and even some liberal Democrats. And he gets the ultra-conservative, so go figure. But I believe that we need to take a whole new look at what's going on in Congress. They have like a single-digit approval rating. But I believe I can go there and change things like Andrew Jackson did. He's the only president that had zero debt, and he killed the bank. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. James. Mr. Christoforski.
Partisan politics, it's alive and well in Washington, D.C. Democrats submit a bill, we automatically vote against it. We submit a bill, they automatically vote against it. It's business, it's business in Washington. That's what happens. That has to stop. I have 35 years of experience in business across multiple disciplines, and one of the ways I succeeded in my career was by working through the system and working with people of opposing viewpoints and getting people of opposing viewpoints to understand where they were wrong and where they were right, and for us to come to an agreement in the end. Right? That's part of what's being in Congress is about. It's not simply voting yes or no, that the Democrats submit a bill, well, I'm going to vote no on it. The Republicans submit a bill, and I'm a Democrat, I'm going to vote no on that bill. It's getting out there, talking to them, and working out the details, working out the differences between yourself and them. The biggest compromise that this country ever had, all right, and people don't like to use the word compromise. They say you have to stand for your principles. Well, you could stand for your principles and still work with the other party. The biggest compromise this country ever had was the signing of the Constitution, was the U.S. Constitution. That was the biggest compromise. Those people went to walk out of that room multiple times, and they were always brought back in. They was brought back in to discuss it and pass the Constitution. Right? We need people in Washington that understand that they have to work together and not always work against each other. And if the Speaker of the House comes to me and says, hey, Joe, you have to vote on this bill because X, Y, and Z, all right? If it's not right for the country, if it's not right for the people, then I'm not going to vote for the bill just because the party says I have to vote for the bill or because the Speaker of the House says I have to vote for the bill. So I'll tell you right now, sometimes when I'm in Congress, I might vote for a bill that was submitted by a Democrat, all right? If it was right for the country and if it was right for the people of the country. Right? We need to work together. We're all Americans first. I mean, Brandon here, I like his statement, says, I'm a Republican and I'm proud of it. Well, I'm an American first and I'm proud of it, all right? Republican is just the party I belong to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rippian?
Thank you. Yes, we are all Americans, and we should always keep that in mind first and foremost. So I do agree with you, Joe. Look, I will reach across the aisle and work with the opposition, work with the Democrats when I can. But I will not compromise on my conservative principles. And that might shock some of you out there, but I'm going there looking for a fight. Our country is in trouble. Our district is in trouble. We need someone to go in there and shake things up. I really believe this. So sure, if it comes to trying to change entitlements and we're 1 or 2% off, of course we can negotiate and find a compromise on some of the specific issues and details. But when it comes to your principles, your conservative principles, I'm not going to compromise on that. I think we should always vote our conscience, the Constitution, and your constituency. And that means holding the line on a lot of these issues. I think the larger issue here is limited government. We have a lot of partisan politics because we have too many career politicians. I believe in the sense of a citizen legislator, that you take your experience to Washington, you apply it, and then you return to your normal life. I believe in term limits, and I think career politicians in bed with lobbyists have gotten us into this mess. So I do support limited government, I do support term limits, and I will stick to my conservative principles. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rippian. Mariah, would you re-ask the question, please?
There is a divisive, corrupting corrosion in American politics today. What would you do to work civilly together in Congress, Democrats and Republicans, to solve the nation's problems?
Delegate Afzali.
Well, most importantly, I think it's important to see the person's record. And there are only actually 3 of us up here that do have a record of working across party lines. And I do want to reach that olive branch out to the senator and to the congressman, because I know that each of them does work across party lines, as do I. I was named by the Gazette magazine my first year in the state legislature as a winner in Annapolis because I do work across party lines. I just passed a bill this year that was very nonpartisan. It was an agriculture bill establishing a honey standard to keep China from tainting honey and selling it to our producers. I like to also do this on the national level. But it is very important to have civility, and it's important to stand your ground, and I am a conservative, so I do hold those conservative principles as I do in Annapolis, and I hold them very strongly, and I argue my points firmly. And in Annapolis, we don't always win, but in Washington, as a Republican and as a conservative, I would have a much better chance, of course, because the numbers are a little less stacked against us. But it's important to be likable, and I go without baggage. I don't have any past history that will haunt me when I get there. I also don't owe anybody anything. I haven't raised money from political action committees. So I don't owe anyone. I don't have lobbyists that I have to kowtow to because I've had to raise money from them. So I think that I definitely fit the bill when it comes to bipartisanship. I have a very well documented record of reaching across the aisle when I can and holding my ground when I absolutely cannot agree.
Thank you, Delegate. Representative Bartlett.
I'm looking for the 9% of the people that think that Congress is doing a good job. My first degree in college was in theology. I wanted to be a medical missionary, and so I had a degree in theology, and I had to take some science courses so that I could go to med school, which I ultimately decided not to do. Probably my degree in theology has served me better in the Congress than any other degree I have, and this, by the way, is the 60th anniversary of my doctorate at the University of Maryland, because I learned to love the sinner and hate the sin, which means that you can like people whose views you do not support. I've been criticized because I've been friendly with people on the other side of the aisle. Nancy Pelosi asked me to sit with her. She is a Maryland daughter, you know, D'Alessandro daughter. She asked me to sit with her at the last two State of the Unions. And this, the second one, there was a huge outcry from Democrats. How could she do that to us? This is a tacit endorsement of Congressman Bartlett, and we crafted that seat for Garrett. He was the front runner at that time. Well, the fact that I accepted her invitation to sit with her and went on a Codell, we were both on the same Codell. She asked me to join her in Iraq for 45 minutes when we were going from one place to another, and just the two of us with the driver and security and so forth. And I had a long opportunity to talk with Nancy. And one of the things I talked about, gee, what if we had a little experiment where we cut the corporate tax rate to 0? Because corporate tax just increases the cost of everything the poor people you want to support have to buy. And if we didn't have the corporate tax rate, they'd have more jobs to buy things that would cost less. Being friendly, going away with a partnership provides all sorts of opportunity to talk with people.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Brinkley.
Thank you. I'd like to make the distinction between being civil, and we frequently have those conversations where we can disagree on an awful lot of issues, versus partisanship, because sometimes the question is about partisanship and what's going on. You know, in Annapolis, there's not a whole lot of partisanship. I mean, I can tell you, as the minority leader, that when there's 12 of us and 35 of them, and you see a light at the end of the tunnel, it's not the end of the tunnel. It's a train coming the other way. You're going to get crushed. So, you know, when that happens, you have to clearly identify and delineate in the issues, what can we do that's for the betterment of our communities? And I would say that virtually all of us do that. Yeah, we have some great disagreements. You've seen some great disagreements up here. Okay, primarily on this end of the table, I'll admit it, but at the same time, when everybody knows or everybody agrees, and you know, and if that's 90%, there's not an awful lot of new ideas that get bantered back and forth, or you know, frankly, some confrontation. And when you hear about disagreements down in Annapolis or Washington, usually it's because there's a conflict in ideas, and that's healthy. That's great. I want to know that somebody feels we should do this for this purpose. I want to know what the reason is to do it a different way. And frequently we all have the same goal line. The question is, how are we going to get there? I've been very pleased to work and be the ranking member on the Budget and Tax Committee. And I work with Senator Edwards. I work with Senator Shank. And you know, Senator Edwards and Delegate Beitzel in particular, because they represent Garrett County, have had to really work hard with the other side, because that's where the votes are. But when I can establish something with somebody in Baltimore City and try to identify something so we can all get what's right for Western Maryland, Baltimore City, the Eastern Shore, that's really where we want to go with this. So I appreciate the opportunity to address that, and we're all interested in moving this country forward. Thank you.
Mr. Brinkley, thank you. Mr. Koblenz.
Thank you. As a project manager, 90% of what I do is communication. I work for, as I mentioned earlier, I work for an online university. We develop our own software. I constantly have to communicate with the business and the developers and testers to try to figure out what is the best way to implement this with who in mind, the user, the students, the faculty, right? It's not about what Congress wants or what the business wants. It's about what's best for the user, or in this case, the taxpayer. So that is my first precondition, if you will. Is this in the best interest of the American people and the taxpayer? Because I think the taxpayer has been too long ignored and just overlooked, and I think it's time that that changes. I do believe in working civilly with the other side, but you also have to remind yourself, was there any compromise in Obamacare? No. They railroaded that and shoved it right down our throat, like it or not. Was there any compromise in redistricting the 6th District? No. They shoved that down our throat, too. I think that's why I named my website standwithrobert.com. It's time we take a stand. You know, I'll compromise if it's in the best interest of the American people, sure. But no, I'm not going to vote for a Democrat liberal bill, and I'm not going to try to get something in there just so I can push a button. It's not about that for me, and it shouldn't be about that for you. We have to stand up on principle and do what's right for not only our generation, but the next generation.
Thank you, Mr. Koblenz. This is the end of our question and answer period. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll have our closing statements from all of our candidates.
A solid education is essential in today's workplace, and Allegany College of Maryland offers over 90 career and transfer programs that will help you build a lasting career. We're Allegany College of Maryland.
Once again, we're going to finish the forum this evening. And again, like we said, the candidates will have 2 minutes to make closing statements. We'll start with Mr. James. Mr. James?
Yes, well, thanks for coming out and giving us this opportunity. I really need you to go again to watch that video, Money as Debt Too. I spent most of my career as a consultant. When I just got out of college, they made me president of one of the premier consulting companies in Silicon Valley. My first customer was Intel. They were the #1 growth company. They wanted someone to figure out how they could do their cost evaluation system. Now, when a bridge collapses like our money system did, you don't just rebuild that bridge with the same design. What a good engineer does is they do a flaw analysis, failure analysis, figure out what's wrong with it, fix the design, and build it better. Now, throughout history, we have examples of just money. The Guernsey example is one. There's something called the Veer in Switzerland. There's 2 billion Swiss francs circulating among merchants there. So what I want you to do is go out and study this. But as far as being a salesman at Congress, my dad taught me how to sell. He invented something called text messages when the touch-tone phone came out. Everybody thought he was crazy. Why in the world would I want to send a letter through a punch on the phone when I could just mail it at the post office? Well, there's hardly any post office left, but it's the #1 form of communications. So imagine how hard it is to go and convince people I funded my farm with just money. People look at me like I'm crazy, but I've got a good way of getting people to see the value in things. I think this is an idea whose time has come. This country needs to get back on a sound money system. If you go back and look at what happened throughout history with the script in Pennsylvania that brought them prosperity, and how when the Bank of England came in, they made them stop doing it, how it depressed the economy. Thank you for coming out. Thanks.
Peter James. Mr. Christoforski.
I want to thank everybody for coming. I'd like to thank the students and the professors who organized the event. We are a debted nation. There's no doubt about it. And we're going to continue to be a debted nation unless we make some serious changes. Right? The debt ceiling's gone up, as I said before. We keep looking at Washington to make changes, Washington to do something. And we keep sending back to Washington the same people over and over again. People who have been there for 10, 15, 20 years. And we look at them to make a change, and the same thing happens. And then 2 years later, we look at them to make a change again, and the same thing happens. Right? We need people in Washington who are going to say, here's the problem. Everybody knows what the problem is. Here's the problem. This is the solution, and this is the roadmap we're going to follow to get there. We don't need people in Washington to educate us. We don't need people in Washington telling us what type of light bulbs we could put in our homes. We don't need people in Washington telling us what type of cars we could drive. We don't need people in Washington telling us what to eat. Right? That's not the job of the federal government. That's the job of your parents. That's the job you do with your children. But that's not the job of the federal government. We need people in Washington who are going to really solve the problems, and not just talk about solving the problems that we keep hearing every 2 years when Congress is elected, and every 6 years when the Senate is elected, and every 4 years when the President is elected. The most powerful branch in our government is the House of Representatives, and they've abdicated that responsibility. The President does whatever he wants. This past week, he introduced an executive order that basically gives them the power to do anything, to turn over his authority to a cabinet member. The House just passed a bill last week called the Federal Restricted Building and Grounds Improvement Act. Right? Sounds like an interesting sounds like an interesting item, doesn't it? If you look at, it's a First Amendment issue. It's going to restrict our freedom of speech and some other items. Joe Christoforski, please support me.
Thank you. Brandon Rippian.
Thank you. We didn't talk about immigration tonight, and I do want to go on record as to some of my beliefs. I do not believe that children born in this country to the parents of illegal aliens deserve automatic birthright citizenship. I believe English should be the national language. I support a policy of deportation through attrition for illegal aliens. That means if there's no jobs for illegal aliens, no privileges for illegal aliens like bank accounts or driver's licenses, and no benefits for illegal aliens like free and reduced meals in school or subsidized housing, they will leave the country, they will return to their own country, and they can apply to come here legally. The parts of this country, the counties in this country that are putting this into place have seen reduction in illegal aliens. And our economy is not going to heal. Our labor markets are not going to heal until we get real immigration reform. I wanted to go on record for that. Look, we all love the congressman. We all respect the congressman. But this country is running out of tomorrow, as I said it earlier tonight. And I ask you, what is our congressman going to do over the next 2 years that he has not done in the past 20? I'm 40 years old. And Congressman Bartlett has had 20 years to fix all of the issues that we talked about tonight. We need real leadership in Washington. Look, I'm a businessman, and as a businessman, I am interested in one and only one thing, and that's results. That's what I'm running on, results. That's what I will bring for you, results. You make Brandon Rippian your next congressman, and that's what I will deliver, results. Thank you.
Delegate Afzali.
Is it on? Okay. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. And you have such an important job, and that is to pick the Republican nominee who will represent you in the general election. And any one of us up here on this panel will be better than the Democrats that are coming to you out of Montgomery County. Now, you should know this, that it will be said that, well, you know, you need to be able to raise a lot of money for this race. You have to raise a lot of money. Well, I will tell you right now, there is no way anyone up here is going to outraise a Democrat in this race. One of them is a half a billionaire. He's funding it himself, so no one here can compete with that. And there's the other gentleman, Gargiola, who will be backed 100% by the Democrat Party. So what is it going to take to win this seat? It's not going to be money. It's going to be grassroots. There is only one person on this panel that has proven to win a grassroots campaign, and that's Kathy Afzali. I know how to win in this district. It's going to take somebody different. It's going to be somebody that can outwalk, out-knock on doors, outwork everyone in this race, and that's me. The Democrat challengers individually have already raised more than all of us collectively have raised. So it's not about incumbency for this race. It's who can win. It is not going to be the congressman. This district was drawn to beat him. So you have a very important decision tonight, because to hold District 6, it's going to be tough. It is going to be a tough district to win. We are outnumbered by Democrats. So it's going to take a tough competitor. That would be me. KathyForCongress.com. I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
Representative Bartlett.
This was set up as a Democrat pickup seat. The registration is 47-37 Democrat to Republican. It is not polling that way. In 2 polls, the district is 11 and 13% more conservative than liberal. They would not reelect the president. In 1 poll, the generic ballot is even, and the other Republican is up, and I'm up in both polls. I was up actually 8% over Garrett Girola. Delaney wasn't a factor then when we did our first poll. So this is clearly a seat that Republicans can win, and we're going to win this seat. I want to reiterate something I said when I started. and that is that the bills in Washington are huge bills. They're hundreds and thousands of pages. They're almost always made up of good things and bad things. And I voted against a lot of things that I would like to have voted for, because there were good things in a bill that was predominantly a bad bill. And the reverse is also true. When you hear people say that I voted against good things, yes, I have, because they were keeping bad companies. The reverse is also true. For nearly 20 years now, it's been my great honor to serve you and represent you in the House of Representatives. As testimony to the fact that I haven't changed, I just noted this week that we're still using palm cards that we had in our '94 campaign. I ran for Congress then for the reason I run now. I have 10 kids, 17 shortly, 18 grandkids, and 2 great-grandkids. And I was concerned that they weren't going to have the same opportunities that I had in this great country. I'm the first person in my family to ever graduate from college, as far as I know. I went on to get a master's degree and a doctorate degree. I have 19 military patents. I just concerned they weren't going to have the same opportunity to work and achieve as I had, which is why I still run. That job isn't finished. Thank you so much for your support.
Representative Bartlett. Senator Brinkley.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm one of the 91% that are very dissatisfied with what's going on in Congress. And I'm concerned. I have 2 children, and our children, my children's, they're stuck with the bill. We're stuck with the bill. And there's a concept that I keep reminding people as I talk, that it's OPM. We talk about Washington in trouble. Well, it's OPM. It's other people's money. That means it's our money. So when they say Washington's in trouble and Washington is going to have a challenge paying some of its debt, it's our money that they need to do that. Our national debt has tripled. It's over $15 trillion at this point in time. And my criticism of the incumbent is that he voted for the last increase. Now, yeah, he voted against all the others up until then. That one vote negates all the no votes. And that's very, very problematic for all of us. I have a very pro-job voting record. When you go to the website, mbrg.org, you'll see that I have the John Shaw Award. Who was that awarded to? Those who have been there and consistently show a high rating on that. And I'm the only one on the panel that has that. I have a conservative voting record when it comes to social issues and all the issues that are of concern to those of us here in Western Maryland. And my aim is to bring fiscal discipline to Washington, because it's not there now. My endorsements, at one point somebody said, well, they're just friends. Yes, I am very fortunate to call George Edwards and Chris Shank and Wendell Beitzel and Leroy Myers my friends. But more importantly, you're in a hiring mode. You're evaluating the candidates who want this slot. And when a candidate puts their resume in front of you, we're looking here to, these are the references that are key. We got into this mess, several elections. We can get ourselves out of the mess coming April 3rd. I'm David Brinkley, and I'm asking you for your vote.
Mr. Koblenz.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. Thank you, Allegany College, Frostburg State University, WCBC. Thank you very much for your time tonight. I have 120 seconds to wrap up closing statements. In those 2 minutes, the federal government's going to borrow $4 million on your behalf, okay? These issues, the reason I'm running, these issues are not new, okay? We cannot, Congressman Bartlett's increased the debt limit 5 times. Senator Brinkley noted that he recently, back in August, voted to increase the debt limit, created the super committee. It's called a debt limit for a reason, and we can't afford to raise it. We need to lower it. You hear the question, are you better off than you were $4 trillion ago? Can you afford 4 more years of Barack Obama? My question for you is, do you want your country back? Okay? In 2010, all across America, we elected conservative Republicans. They need backup. I am a principled conservative Republican. I'm an everyday American. I work full-time. I campaign full-time. Ask my wife. She's been very nice and very flexible with my schedule. So, Katie, thank you very much. But do you think the Democrats rather run against career politicians or working America? Okay? I talked about standing up and fighting for principle and what you believe in, individual liberty, free economic principles, free markets. I don't want to go down to D.C. and be popular. I want to serve our constituents. I signed a term limit pledge to serve no more than 3 House terms. I don't want to be a U.S. Senator. I don't want to be a governor. I just want to serve my constituents and get our country back. I live in the district. I think that's very important. Like I mentioned earlier, it's a liability. And I feel if you don't live in the district with the people that you represent, who do you represent? The answer is you only represent yourself. Thank you.
Mr. Koblenz. Mr. Ficker, you have the final statement.
Robin Ficker 2012 on Facebook, robinficker2012.com on the internet. Take a look at the videos there, my positions on the issues. We need to develop the Marcellus Shale, get that clean natural gas into the 18-wheelers, save that oil, bring money here. They were popular in Frederick when they sent out $100 checks. They're going to be millionaires in this room when we develop that Marcellus Shale that they're developing in West Virginia and Pennsylvania. I'm a real estate broker. Joe, I can help you find a home here when you decide to move in from Baltimore. I'm a former legislator. This is the only time in Maryland history that we've had any Maryland legislators run for Congress in a district that is entirely outside their legislative district, and it's happening twice in this election. We need new energy on the Hill. I've got plenty of that. I've been in 25,000 cases in Maryland courts. I know how to work in a cordial adversary process with the other side. I grew up on Capitol Hill. My dad worked for 40 years in the Congressional Research Service of the Library of Congress. As someone who, as I said, who has an honorable discharge from the Army, I know that we only achieve peace through strength, but I'm not going to go into other lands and see our boys killed there because 35 of my classmates were killed in action, and I know the pain that brings. Please vote for me. Take a look at my website. I've been coming out here to court for 30 years, not just today, not just the past few months, for 30 years in Western Maryland, ever since they had that U-turn in the fog where they now have the cut-through in the mountain.
Thank you, Mr. Ficker. And once again, a good round of applause for every one of our candidates who took time out of their day and their schedule to be with us today. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you to our students, Mariah, Susan, Forrest, and Daniel. And again, thank you to the candidates, to the state and local governments, the class of Allegany College of Maryland, the Beall Institute of Frostburg State University, and especially all the students who worked so hard to prepare and organize this event. The Garrett and Allegany County Central Committees, also the Garrett County Democrat Club, and WCBC Radio, 1270 AM, and the sponsors. But most of all, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching this forum for candidates, Maryland 6th District for the U.S. Congress. Please take advantage of early voting opportunities or go to the polls on April 3rd. Let your voice be heard. And again, we remind you that this evening's forum was recorded, will be played back on Atlantic Broadband Channel 97 and Comcast Channel 3 at dates and times to be announced. Thank you once again, and good night.
You're watching the Allegany College of Maryland's state and local government classes Maryland 6th Congressional District Republican Debate, held March 24th at the Cumberland campus of Allegany College of Maryland, in conjunction with Frostburg State University's J. Glenn Bell Jr. Institute for Public Affairs and the Allegany College of Maryland Center for Continuing Education, in cooperation with the Garrett County Democrat Club and the Garrett and Allegany County Central Committees.